Hey, I'm Cameron McKenzie. I'm the editor-in-chief over at theserverside.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at CameronMCNZ, and I wanted to talk to you about keep filters and appending CSV data to the end of an existing CSV file. In my last tutorial, I did some reading and writing of some CSV files. Here I want to actually do some filtering and appending. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to create a brand new process, and I'm going to call it Filter and Append CSV. That creates the project, and when the project starts up, I'm going to open the main workflow window, and right off the bat, I'm going to click on this Append to CSV action. So you can find that under App Integration CSV, and Read CSV is what I want. I want to read a CSV file. And when you ask to read a CSV file, it'll say, well, which file do you want to read? And you'll notice it takes you right to the root of the project there. So that's where all the projects are stored on my local file system. And you can see right there, Filter and Append CSV is my project name. I don't have any files in there. And so I'm actually going to go into that folder on my file system and actually add a couple of files. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new CSV file. And I'm going to call it input file.csv. And I'm going to create a second file called output file.csv, because that's really what we want to do here. We want to read from one CSV file, filter it, and then append to the output.csv file. Okay, so I've got my two files right here. Now that input file, I don't have anything in there right now, but I'm going to use the names of some of my favorite Toronto talk show personalities. Shout out to Toronto Mike. And with this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter these results so that I've only got mics. So my last example, I filtered out mics. So in the name of fairness, I'm going to just keep all the mics in this iteration. And all of the mics that I keep are then going to be appended to this output file. Now, one thing you need to know is that in order to append to a file, you have to have some data inside of it. If you have an empty file, you can just write. But if you want to append, you actually have to have some data in there to start off with. So I guess I'll put a mic in here. He's not a Toronto personality, but Mike Tyson. Okay, and now I have my output file prepped. And okay, that is I guess kind of the basic groundwork that I have to lay out. So now when I say what CSV file do you want to read, I can just point to that input file, and it's going to ask me what temporary variable name do you want to use for that. Now I haven't set up any temporary variables, so I have to click on variables here. I have to create a new variable, and I guess I'll put the input into a variable named input, and its variable type is going to be data table. Now you probably don't have that data table option available right off the bat. If you don't, you have to go browse for types and type in data table, and there's a whole bunch of them. So you want to make sure you've got the system data table. And we're going to take all of the input and put it into that input variable. And when we filter, we're going to save all of the results of the filtering in a variable called output. So I guess I may as well create that output variable at the same time. Okay, so that's good. So that's kind of the setup that we've got now. We've got our CSV files. We've got the variables that we'll use inside of the sequence, inside of the application. And when we read this input file, we're going to store it in that temporary variable called input. That's the one that we created right down here. And so after we read the file, well, we're going to do some programming, going to add some logic here. That's some data table logic that we get in this activities tab. And specifically, we want to do some filtering. So I'm going to say filter some data, add this here. In the filter wizard, we're going to take the results of the input. So the results of reading that file, which is in that input variable, and we're going to filter. And when we're done, we're going to store it in that output variable. And where are we going to filter? How are we going to do this filter? We're going to do a keep filter. So we're going to keep all of the records where the first name is equal to Mike. And we have to find that equal to operation. Now you got to make sure these are in quotes. If it's not in quotes, it's not going to work. So just be careful. Make sure you've got those in quotes. Input and output is specified. That all looks fantastic. And with the filtering done, we can now say, hey, after we filtered everything out, we want to append to a CSV file. So we now drag and drop the CSV app integration onto the sequence. It's going to say, what file do you want to append to? And we're going to say, hey, we're going to append to that output file. And what data are you going to append to? Well, we're going to append all of the data that is now stored in that output variable that was generated through the result of this filtered data table process activity. Okay, now save this. So I click Save. I then run the application. Everything looks honky-dory. And then when I go over here, notice that it's going to say Notepad++ says, hey, somebody's changed that output file. And if I say, yeah, reload it, you notice that all of the mics have been filtered out from that file and they've been appended. So unlike the write, we haven't deleted everything and then rewritten it. What we've done is we've actually opened up the file and appended to the end of it. And there you go. That's how simple and straightforward it is to do some filtering and then append the results of a CSV filter to an existing CSV file. And there you go. That's how the UiPath keep filter and the CVS CSV append action works. Now, if you enjoyed that tutorial, why don't you head over to the serverside.com. We got all sorts of great tutorials over there about everything to do with enterprise software development. If you're interested in my personal antics, why don't you follow me on Twitter at CameronMCNZ? And I always suggest, why don't you subscribe on YouTube?